Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Hello and welcome to GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Cynthia, and I'm joined here today with my co-host, Keith.
You're not going to call me lovely this week?
Not this week.
How was your Thanksgiving?
It was great. I ate a lot of good food. Let's see. I went to Apple Hill. Have you heard of Apple Hill?
Yeah, I grew up in Sacramento area of California.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's like a standard rite of passage.
Well, so I went there over the weekend and it was snowing. And here in California, depending where you are,
California's a big state.
You have to go to the snow.
Mm-hmm.
So I know like in other areas, like in the Midwest or wherever.
If you live in Utah, you don't go to the snow goes to you.
Exactly. So it's really funny saying that out loud because I have to think like, okay, well, it's just funny that I have to physically go to the snow. And the thing is, I was not prepared. I was not in snow gear halfway through the drive there. It's about like an hour and a half from where I live. And my sister logs into her Instagram and she has a friend that's in Apple Hill and it's covered in snow. And we're already halfway, like 40 minutes into our drive, and none of my family and I are in snow gear. Like we have like light jackets on. I'm wearing Nikes.
Goodness.
So yeah, my toes were definitely numb.
That's funny because quite frequently you'll drive over here or something and you'll be wearing sandals and I'll make a comment like, how can you wear sandals? It's only like 50 degrees outside.
Yeah.
And you'll say, I like being cold, but apparently not snowing cold.
Not snowing cold. Well, again, we grew up like in Northern California.
That's
so
true.
we're sissies compared to other people who grew up around that constant cold weather.
When I was a kid, when I would walk to school uphill both ways, that's a joke. I would always be super excited if there was ice anywhere because it was just such a rare occurrence for things to freeze outside of my freezer. That's, talk about the lap of luxury. Right. But speaking of snow and cold weather, we're all thinking about it. It's happening in like 3 weeks exactly, I think. Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. It's Christmas time.
I know. I love this time of year. The most wonderful time of the year.
Yeah.
It's also one of the most stressful. I mean, a lot of people are out shopping, buying gifts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm avoiding all malls at all costs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
doing all of my shopping online.
Yeah. Well, one thing we aren't avoiding are Christmas movies.
Which is the topic of today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Christmas movies. And if I'm being super honest, we will probably talk about Christmas movies next week.
Yes, because there's just so much to cover, and I think this should be a part 1. So we're going to review 2 to 3 movies today, and then next week I think that'll be a good one too, to do more, 3 more Christmas movies, because there's so many out there.
There's just so many ways to talk about Christmas movies. Like, do we talk about the fact that some Christmas movies are just Christmas movies because they came out during the Christmas season, even though they don't really have anything to do with Christmas, aka Die Hard? Like, how do you even define a Christmas movie? But one such movie that we all know and love that has been released in several different iterations is The Grinch. So today we're going to be specifically talking about Jim Carrey's The Grinch, Benedict Cumberbatch's The Grinch, and it's not in the show notes. But we'll probably talk about the OG, The Grinch.
The
animated one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine pretty much everyone has seen that, right? Did you see that as a kid?
I did, the cartoon.
Good. Well, why don't we start from the beginning? What do we love about that cartoon? What's so good about it?
I like the color green. So, I like that. And
so you personally relate to the Grinch.
Right. I think now that I'm older, I can definitely relate to the Grinch. I definitely have those moments where I can be kind of Grinchy. At least that's where my mom says sometimes. But no, it's definitely like a classic, and it's one of my favorite movies. To be honest, I think I first saw the cartoon. Or is it a cartoon? Are we
Yeah, we're talking about, I don't know what year it came out in, but it's the original one with like the narration over the top.
Yes.
And it's got that guy with the super low voice who
Yes.
says, and then he climbed down the chimney with care. And then the Grinch, the animated Grinch, looks over and like sneers this really weird smile. And it has the original You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. And it's like that low baritone crooner.
You're a mean one. Mr. Grinch. Well, you could be the narrator.
Yeah.
You have the voice of a narrator.
Thank you.
Maybe you could do like if they release another Grinch movie.
Yeah, they'll call me up. Yeah,
they might.
Disney's the one that's going to do it. So Disney, Keith Cook.
Okay,
you know,
really quick. Speaking about Disney, do you know the latest one that just came out last year, 2018?
Mm-hmm. Was that Disney or was it DreamWorks? I think it was DreamWorks.
Was it DreamWorks?
I'm not sure. In the comments below, please
let us know because I have
remedy our ignorance.
I have something to say about the narration that I'm going to get into a little bit later. But for the first segment, we're going to be comparing the Grinch, which came out, the latest movie that came out last year in 2018.
With Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes.
And then, can we just talk about how awesome his voice is?
It is. And it's, wait, we're not talking about the same one. The Grinch, the one that came out last year, you know who narrated that one?
Oh, you're talking about the narration. Okay.
The narration is Pharrell.
No way.
Yes. Like, are you happy? I think that's the name of the song. So, right. And that's actually just my flat out opinion. Comparing the movie that came out 2018 versus How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey. I prefer the Jim Carrey live action film over the animated one that just released.
Yeah. So I actually, I know this is awful of me to admit because you gave me the show notes and told me to watch it. I didn't get to watch it. So like, just generally, what are probably like the primary differences between the Grinch that Benedict Cumberbatch was in that Pharrell narrated and the Jim Carrey Grinch?
Definitely the narration. I feel like that's a big factor in how the story is being told, because how you said in the very first like cartoon version and then the movie that Jim Carrey was in, they both have that similar like very deep narration voice, and I was really tuned in. Like it was just, I feel like who was it that told who spoke in that deep voice?
I don't know. I have no idea who the narrator was.
I think it was like I looked it up. I think his name's Anthony something, but I don't want to give the wrong name out. But the narration definitely makes the two stories sound different. Pharrell, you know, we know him as a musician, and like every time I think of Pharrell, I think of like his song Happy. And
we are always talking, whenever we talk about a trash film, it's almost inevitable that someone from the music industry was involved in making that film or involved in acting in that film. So we know that it's a pretty hard crossover. Not everybody can be JT.
Right. And so Pharrell, like just the way he was narrating the latest Grinch movie, I just wasn't into it. It seemed to me like it was just another animated film. Like it didn't really speak Christmas to me.
Okay.
Even just the animation quality, I don't know if it was produced by the same people who produced Despicable or Despicable Me.
I have a feeling that it was.
Because it looks almost identical, like the characters.
The character design, from what I remember from the trailer, was like the Grinch is supposed to be this like really nasty, evil person who absolutely hates Christmas. And when I saw the trailer, it was just so much more kid-friendly that I feel like it really alienated part of what the Grinch story is all about. It was distracting in a way, if that makes sense.
No, I absolutely agree. I watched this film with my brother over the weekend, actually, and we both said the same thing. Like, we just couldn't get into the newer film. Like, it's definitely catered towards the younger audience, definitely more kid-friendly, whereas the live-action film with Jim Carrey definitely has a more adult humor, and I think maybe that's why I enjoy it more. Yeah. And also because I just grew up watching the Jim Carrey film. I feel like when you're always comparing the new versus the old, the majority of the time it's hard to top off the original or the older version. So I think maybe we could be a little more biased just based off, our generation.
Well, and then when I talk to people who are older than me about which Grinch film is the best, a lot of people are of the opinion that the Jim Carrey movie is objectively bad.
Really? Who are you talking to?
People who are like I'm 29. So people who are in their mid 30s, they grew up with the original one that I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast. That was the animated one with the deep, low voice, and much like it didn't really lean on the talent of the actors that were in the film as much as it leaned on the narration and the heartfelt storyline that was written by Dr. Seuss. If I'm wrong and Dr. Seuss didn't write this, I'm going to be super embarrassed. But I'm like 99% sure.
No.
I can't believe that I'm saying this. We should have Googled it before we started. But no, I can't. So Dr. Seuss wrote the original, and it is just this really, it's kind of like a song that sounds happy but is about something really sad, like Third Eye Blind, Semi-Charmed Kind of Life. It's got this like whimsical, classic Dr. Seuss animation. Everything rhymes, and he like uses variations of like old Christmas poems and things like that. Right. And then over the top of that, you've got this story about this ostracized social reject who lives up in the mountains and is kind of looked at as like a boogeyman by this society.
The outsider.
Yeah, he's the outsider, especially because the whole culture of this society in the story is based on the premise that Christmas is like the best thing that has ever happened in the world. And like when you kind of take that, the foreboding and the mean kind of disposition that the original Grinch has, and then you put that into like a very kid-friendly animated movie, I think you're going to lose a lot of the sincerity that the original story has. But on that note, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Grinch, but we're going to take a quick commercial break. So we'll be right back.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Hello and welcome back to GSMC Movie Podcast. Right before the break, we were comparing the two films, the 2018 film of The Grinch versus the older version, the Jim Carrey version.
And a little bit of discussion on the original film from
I know that we need like a graph or something.
80s. Yeah, I know. Well, there's so many ways to tell a story as good as The Grinch, but I really want to kind of drill down into the Jim Carrey version because I think it's a really good movie, and like I just kind of want to hear your thoughts on it because, like I said, a lot of people in a lot of circles think that it's objectively a bad film. So, like, what did you like about the film aside from the nostalgia that you have associated with it?
Right. Okay. So, for one, again, my name is Cynthia. For those of you who don't know, so Cindy Lou Who. My parents used
there a correlation there?
Right. So, like, my parents always had this joke, like calling me like Cindy Lou Who.
Oh.
So I know I hate being called Cindy, so don't ever call me that.
I won't do that. Cindy.
I know, and listeners don't ever call me Cindy either. But anyway, so
except
I
for
think
in the comments all the time.
No, I probably shouldn't have even mentioned it. Now people may be calling me like Cindy Lou Who. But anyways, so I think for one, I can't remember the name of the actress who plays Cindy Lou Who in the Jim Carrey film, but
she's so darling.
Yeah, like I just really connected with her. One, for the name. Two, it goes back. I'm going back to the narration because I feel like the animated one that just released just really did not nail it.
Not like Pharrell.
No. Well, not just Pharrell, but even the whoever did the voice for the Cindy Lou Who in the animated film, the 2018.
I feel like it was the woman who played Hermione Granger, or like what was that?
It just kind of ruined it for me.
It was a well-known name that did the voice acting.
Mm-hmm. Like there's Cindy Lou Who, like she was actually, like a child, and like I was just a child growing up watching her. Like I just resembled her in so many ways. Whereas in the animated one, I felt like the voice of Cindy Lou Who in that film was too grown, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah. It was a well-known name, so I would imagine that the woman who played her was much older.
Yeah, so just like her voice talking, I just was like, I don't really. To me, like even the name is very like cute and
yeah, Cindy Lou Who, like it rhymes just like the rest of the story does.
Right. So I just feel like just the narration kind of like threw it off for me. For that reason, it just didn't. I felt like the narrator, the voice didn't match up to their lines and like the characters. So that was a big one for me because I wasn't connected to the characters as much as I was in the Jim Carrey film. Yeah. And also I wanted to touch on just the actual physical appearance of the Grinch because when you think of the Grinch, he's like this like dark green, forest green, like gross guy. Like when Jim Carrey portrayed him, like that's what I thought, like, oh, he's gross and
during the song he smiles and there's like cockroaches in his teeth. Oh, that was great.
Right. And like he's just like not groomed, and I don't know, and I also felt like the Jim Carrey film, I liked that they provided a more in-depth background story.
That was my next question. Grinch. Yeah, did they go into the backstory of the Grinch at all in the new one?
Very pretty briefly. It was just pretty much that he felt isolated and abandoned as a child because he didn't have family. Right. But I thought that the Jim Carrey film, they dove way deeper into the actual background of how he actually became the Grinch, because he was like a nice little fellow at first, and it showed that he had a crush on Martha in grade school. Yes. And so I kind of liked the background story of that Grinch. And
they didn't have that similar plot in the new one?
It's a very different storyline. The writers are definitely not the same.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that the original Dr. Seuss story has any backstory as to how the Grinch became the Grinch. Dr. Seuss just says that his heart was 3 sizes too small. And that was why he was such a cold and mean individual.
See, and in the latest Grinch, they said it's only 2 sizes too small.
What?
Yeah, 2 sizes, yes. It says
you are lying.
2 sizes too small.
It's 3 sizes too small.
That's what I'm saying. The writers kind of changed the words a little bit.
That's so much more palatable than 3 times as small.
And really quick, something you mentioned earlier was about the kind of like poetic lines, the rhyming, because this is a Dr. Seuss film, right? And that's also what I liked about the Jim Carrey film.
Yeah, they managed to keep the rhyme scheme in a lot of the narration, and it was juxtaposed by this, like, I don't want to call it like gritty necessarily, because I don't know if you'd call that performance by Jim Carrey gritty, but like with the material that he was given, it was a pretty gritty performance. It was very similar to like when Jim Carrey played the Riddler in the Batman movie that he was in. He was able to kind of capture like a whimsy to the character that shouldn't have been there because the film material was so dark. Whereas like in this one, he does a similar thing in the opposite direction, where the film material is so lighthearted and ultimately redeeming, and he's able to find like a true kind of darkness within the material that he's giving. Because like in the Jim Carrey movie, you really feel like the Grinch is a person who is beyond redemption for a short period of time. Like even after he's had a little bit of his transformative moment later on in the film, like he still isn't completely changed. He's still like complaining about having to do certain things, and like in the final scenes he's still a bit of a troublemaker. So I think that like there's just something unique about that. Is that not something that was in the most recent film at all? Not
really. Like I think, just my personal opinion, again, I really couldn't get quite into like the Grinch character, because it just the animation, it reminded me too much of other films. Like I wasn't really, it didn't feel Christmassy. And I feel like the Grinch makes the film Christmassy, because most of us, when we think of the Grinch, we automatically pin it to Christmas time, right? Like, so yeah, I definitely didn't get that vibe from the newer one. And
So I want to talk about real quick, like why I think the Jim Carrey movie is really, really good. And I want to hear like your thoughts on my opinion and for you to juxtapose or to compare my thoughts on why the Jim Carrey is good and let me know if any of this is in the newest one.
Okay.
So
go for it.
Part of the reason why I think that the Jim Carrey film is actually a good film is because it speaks to something deeper than just like Christmas has been appropriated by capitalism and consumerism, because it's not just about finding the true meaning of Christmas, but finding like a true form of redemption and change. So the Grinch with Jim Carrey, he actually has a transformative experience because of the mercy and love of a small girl who was willing to take a chance on the fact that he wasn't really who he was portraying himself to be. And the reason that he was portraying himself to be that way was because of a trauma that he had experienced as a child. So it actually, in my opinion, uses some pretty well-established literary functions and mechanics and tropes in order to portray a character who's really accessible, because I think all of us have these coping mechanisms that we use in order to keep people at a distance or to make people think of us in a way that we believe to be better for us because it protects us. And that's ultimately what Jim Carrey's portrayal of the Grinch does, is as he's doing all of these bad things, it's so that people will stay away, so that he doesn't have to make a connection with other individuals. And then Cindy refuses to allow that facade to prevent her from making a true, I'm going to say human, but I know they're who's, right?
Yeah, they're who's.
True human or human.
Right, human.
Connection with the Grinch. And by the end of the film, she's made that connection, and it shows that like the meaning of Christmas is for relationship with other people, but not only that, the way by which transformation occurs is through connection with other people and like an admonition of responsibility for the things that you've done, and that like transformation comes from within, both in forgiving yourself and in the forgiveness of others. Because at the end of the film, like some of the other characters in the movie are still upset with Jim Carrey's The Grinch, right? And they don't want to forgive him, but everybody in the community kind of rallies around Cindy Lou Who and decides like we need to include this person in order to change them. And so there's actually a real redemptive and a profound story arc within all of that. So is any of that present in the new movie?
Yeah, I think so. Just a different spin to it. I'm not trying to give. Well, it's not really a spoiler alert because like
we
same
all know
story.
this story.
Right.
I don't think there's much of a spoiler.
But yeah, it's the same thing. Whereas in the newer Grinch, he isolates himself from society because again he felt those childhood traumas, right, didn't allow him to connect with other people. So instead of going out of his way to connect with the other Who's, he instead was like, let me distance myself and just kind of not talk to anybody. And at the end of the film, same thing through Cindy Lou Who, she starts inviting him to spend time with her family. And at the very end of the film, he ends up getting invited to a holiday party, which has never happened.
Right.
So yeah, it ends
That's
up being
the same basic plot line.
It's pretty much the same basic plot line, but it's I guess the journey through which they take us through that story and through that transformation that makes me prefer the Jim Carrey film more over the new one. But that all of that said, I still would suggest this movie to kids. I'm not saying like don't go watch the new Grinch.
Right.
I still enjoyed it for what it was, and just again, this is just a comparison. If I had to choose between the two films, I would go with a Jim Carrey, but that's not to say that,
or the OG from
or
like
the OG, the
60s
cartoon,
to 70s,
right?
Whenever it came out. Yeah.
But that's not to say that the newer Grinch that came out last year is not good. I think it's different. So I think that's the thing. It's just different because I grew up with the Jim Carrey one. So who knows? Maybe, like I said, in 20 years from now, they might recreate another Grinch.
Oh,
and the
you
kids,
think it's going to take 20 years?
I know, maybe like less than that, right?
Yeah,
they're constantly
5 to
coming
10
out,
years,
right?
yeah.
5 to 10 years. So Yeah, I think it just depends on who you ask. Because how you said your friends who are in their mid-30s prefer the not even the Jim Carrey one, right? Yeah. The original. So I think it's gonna be based off generations.
Yeah, and in like 10 years, when somebody else is doing a podcast, and they're our age 10 years from now, they're going to be talking about how the Jim Carrey movie was, you know, it was good, but it wasn't as good as the one that came out in 2018. Like,
right? I know, that's crazy.
Everybody's opinion is just relative to their experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you have small children, highly recommend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Highly recommend. And it has, let me say a positive thing about the newer Grinch.
Yeah.
The colors, the animation is
I did
top
notice
notch.
that,
like
yeah.
it's like a neon green. So it's definitely more kid friendly, like even for babies. I think that was the point. Just the colors attract younger kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when I watched the trailer, it felt like I was watching a movie that starred a bunch of pieces of candy.
Right.
It was just very loud.
No. So I do suggest the movie. Go watch it. And it's Christmas time. So what better time than to watch it now?
Yeah. You have plenty of time to watch all of them. You can only watch Elf so many times.
Right. Oh, that should be a movie we review.
Yeah.
One of them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there will definitely be a part 2 to the Christmas movies, because
maybe even a part 3 if we are unlucky. I mean, lucky
there's just
enough.
so many. There's just so many. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to move on to dissecting a different Christmas movie. So we'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC movie podcast, and we are talking about Jingle, Jingle all the way. Wow.
That was so, you're good at imitating people. So can you guys guess the film if you know it?
Didn't I just say Jingle all the way?
I know, but maybe people didn't catch on to the wow, that last part.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, the little the classic Arnold Schwarzenegger I don't know what exactly that would be called. It's kind of just like a idiosyncrasy, I think is what it's called, where it's just like a habit that you kind of have that he just kind of does when he's speaking English. But we are talking about Jingle All the Way, the classic, is it 90s?
It is 90s.
Yeah, classic 90s Christmas / action / rom-com.
Is it action?
I mean,
it's
saw the ending
comical.
Of the movie, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So the ending of the movie, I would definitely slot hardcore into the action portion or action genre, right? So why don't you let's just give the premise for anybody who hasn't seen the movie yet.
I feel like this is your typical like 90s Christmas film. It's pretty generic, to be honest. It's, a father who works a lot, and too much because of his work responsibilities, he's avoiding his child a little bit, and the child feels neglected. And the child then asks his dad, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger, for a specific action figure.
And it's a very popular action figure that everybody wants.
It's in high demand.
Yeah, it's Turbo Man.
Exactly. And so Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think his name's Harold in the film.
Yes, yeah.
So Harold, he goes out of his way, does whatever he can.
It's only like 2 letters off from Arnold. You just take the N and replace it with an H, and you
That is so funny. I think, I'll get into like my thoughts. I'm going to give you guys the plot first. Please. So yeah, pretty much Harold goes out of his way, does whatever he can to get this action figure for his son.
Yeah, there's this subplot that his wife is going to like, she's about to leave him because he's such a workaholic. And so like the fact that he's supposed to pick up this toy before the giant rush and nobody can get it. But he, because of his work commitments, doesn't end up actually doing that. So I guess chaos ensues would be the way that I would kind of describe it. Right?
Right.
Oh my gosh. Is Ice Cube in this movie?
Ice Cube? That is not Ice Cube.
No, it's Sinbad. Sinbad is in this movie. I forgot about Sinbad. He plays the mailman who is also trying to get
the
Turbomon. And he's like not a villain, but a villain at the same time. It's really, really, it's weird.
Right.
It's such a great movie.
It is. Actually, like, it was so like bad funny that I actually could sit through it and watch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This if I ever have a family, this is a Christmas tradition. We're going to watch Turbo Man every year. I'm Turbo Man. We're going to watch Arnold Schwarzenegger every year.
Right.
So the movie, we try to avoid breaking things down scene by scene, but there's just a few scenes in this film that I really kind of want to talk about a little bit and just get your thoughts on. So it opens up with this hilarious like TV show, right? It starts out like you're in the TV show about Turbo Man.
So because of that, I actually thought I was watching the wrong film because it starts off how you said it starts off as a TV show, like a comic. Like what is like superhero,
Power Rangers.
like Power Rangers.
Yeah.
That's literally what I thought. So I was like, am I raw? Like I was actually confused, but that's how the film starts. So if this is your first time watching Jingle All the Way and you're confused by the beginning of the film, that's how it starts. Because I was just as confused. I was like, what am I watching right now? And then
you're definitely watching the right movie. And like, is Arnold Schwarzenegger the guy who plays Turbo Man in the TV show? I felt like he was, but like, or was it just some other buff dude?
I think it was, I honestly didn't quite catch it.
Okay.
Because he does play Turbo Man later on in the film. And
by complete accident.
Right.
Oh, and the way that they get there is just so great.
Yeah, it's just, it's like taking scene by scene, it's like these things would never happen. Like, what are the chances? What are the odds of like? Yeah, you just have to watch. I don't want to give like too much away because a lot of people, I don't know, maybe you haven't seen this movie, maybe you have.
It's surprising how many people haven't seen this
movie, including me.
It's so good.
I didn't watch this film until you told me about it, but I've seen the cover of it. It's not like I've never heard of the film.
No,
I've never like went out of my way to watch it.
It gets circulated a fair amount during the Christmas season, so I want to kind of talk about like some of. Go back to like my favorite scenes, right? So there's a scene in the movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger, so he has this neighbor, right? And the neighbor's like my favorite character because there's this continuous plot line of the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife or Harold's wife makes like the best cookies in town. And so his neighbor, who is like, he's a recently divorced man, is like vying for the attention of Harold's wife, who is threatening to leave him over his workaholic tendencies and his absentee fatherhood, right? Or fathering rather. And the neighbor is like in his house when his wife is making cookies and helping her make the cookies, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger calls the house and he like yells at him like, "Don't eat my cookies."
I see. Okay, another point I want to make. When I think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think of, California governor. I also think like politics, and I think the Terminator.
Right.
So,
because this is classic, yeah.
Right.
Or Predator.
And I'm not sure, is this the only comedy film he's done?
Oh my gosh. Have you not seen Twins?
I don't think so.
Twins is like Jingle All the Way, but even better because it's Arnold Schwarzenegger and his fraternal twin brother.
Oh my God.
Danny DeVito.
Stop.
No, I'm serious. It is amazing. Supposedly, there's a rumor going around that they're filming a Twins 2, but they're calling it Twins 3 because you can't have two twins. Like, so twins would already be Twins 2, so they're calling it Twins 3. And the fraternal twin in the movie is like Chris Rock or something ridiculous like that.
Stop. Chris Rock?
No, seriously, yeah. Or Kevin, you know what?
I may need
$5
to
says it's Kevin Hart.
Oh
somebody,
my God.
Somebody Google this for me and put it in the comments so that I can feel more confident about it. But yeah, I can't believe you haven't seen Twins.
I haven't. I have
my
not.
Gosh. Yeah, no, Arnold Schwarzenegger is well known as like an action guy.
Action, right. That's why
Predator.
It was kind of hard for me to like it was hard for me to take him seriously because I was just like, he's trying to be this
Total
like
Recall.
Right. Like he's trying to be this like fun, like loving dad, and
it's
just like
sneak a couple action scenes in there for him.
They
like,
do.
There's this one scene where he attempts to acquire Turbo Man through illegitimate means, and it ends up being part of like a police raid where he has to like fight off and run away from the cops, and then also fight an army of fake mall Santas. Like there's a mall Santa mafia that secretly sells popular like, rip-off versions of popular Christmas toys. And like this guy's a workaholic, right? And he lives in like the suburbs of some random place. He's upset about losing $50 so much so that he's willing to start a fight with like 100 fake Santas, which I just think is hilarious. Because if you're workaholic,
it wasn't $50. It was $300.
Oh, was it $300?
It was $300.
Okay, I thought it was just like they charged him double, not like some like insane amount. So $300. I guess
for a toy
in the 90s, I could see you being a little bit more upset about that. But like
that's like how much. Have you seen how much toys cost nowadays? I went to Target recently.
Kids, so.
I don't have kids either, and I honestly don't know why I was going through the toy section. But anyways,
it's Target. You end up wandering around everywhere, no matter what you do.
Exactly, buying things that I don't need, going there for one, leave with 10. But yeah, toys are expensive, so I wouldn't be surprised if parents are actually paying that much money for a kid's toy.
Okay,
but yeah, overall, it's just it was a too try hard for me. Like I feel like comedy films are one of the most challenging genres to like really succeed in.
Yeah, they almost never win awards for that very reason.
And I feel like honestly, like Will Smith is probably my favorite actor because of that, because he's naturally funny. Like I feel like comedy, you have to naturally be funny.
Which Will Smith movies do you like?
Bad Boys.
I actually haven't seen that.
Oh, we okay. That may have to be in the future.
Yeah,
for next year, because we're on the Christmas wave right now.
I thought you were going to say Wild Wild West, in which case I was going to say agreed. Excellent movie. It's also a trash film. It is so ridiculous. Anyway.
Yeah, but that's why I feel like a lot of, especially when it's like a Christmas comedy movie, I'm a little more critical of it, just because maybe this makes me the Grinch, but I'm not like crazy about Christmas movies. Like literally the only one I really, really like is the Grinch. That's like my top one. Unless it's some other Christmas movie I'm sleeping on.
What about Elf?
I like Elf. I'm not like crazy. Like that's not a movie I can watch over and over again. Like the Grinch, I could watch over and over again and not get tired of it.
Yeah, I know people who will exclusively watch Elf from like December until, well, actually from like the last week of November until Christmas. Like if they're going to watch a Christmas movie, it's Elf every single time.
No, I feel like I'm going to watch it probably within this week or next week. Maybe for our next Christmas episode.
Yeah, everybody does an Elf movie night, which
yeah,
it's like a popular thing. It's like Friendsgiving.
Right. And I need to refresh my memory off that movie because it has been quite some time since I've seen it.
Yeah, I wonder if Jingle All the Way was kind of like the Elf of the 90s, because it was like a big star that everybody's familiar with in a role that is like, because in the 90s people did know that Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was a little bit more familiar as being kind of a more diverse actor, and they were like, you knew going into the movie that it was going to be like a tongue-in-cheek thing that he's doing this comedy, because it's like this big buff dude, which by the way, they make him look way taller than he actually is.
Is he not tall?
Movie. No, he's like, I want to say he's 5'10" or 5'11".
Well, it's because he has broad
huge
shoulders.
Yeah. And then like the camera angles, I'm pretty sure that they intentionally tried to make him look a little bit taller than he actually was. Of course.
Who wants to look like a midget on the screen?
No. Well,
right.
And like, you do your audience research, you find out what they like more, and then you go accordingly. But all that to say, like it's surprising that this movie, well, actually it's not surprising at all that this movie kind of has turned into a joke, because it was a joke originally. But I have a feeling that if we were to talk to those same people who like the original Grinch more than the Grinch that we like with Jim Carrey, they're going to say the same thing about like, oh, I don't really like Elf, it's too much, but I love Jingle All the Way. I just feel like it's like it was really the only thing that was doing this at the time, unless you were watching like National Lampoon's Christmas. And like even, have you seen Christmas Story? The one that's like you're going to shoot your eye out, Ralphie, I think is his name.
Oh, I don't think so. Remember, I'm not that big into Christmas movies, so
it's
I'm like,
really, honestly, okay. In my opinion, it's not that great of a movie. As far as Christmas movies are concerned, I feel that it's a little bit too long, and you know, we can just put it on the docket. We should talk about A Christmas Story. Regardless, there aren't that many films that do what Jingle All the Way does, and even if Jingle All the Way executes it in a way that isn't necessarily as funny or as like, I don't know, amazing as other films might do it. I think that because it exists in such a unique space of Christmas movies, that it's really worth a watch. I'm like an 8 out of 10. Watch this movie. How do you feel? Yeah. What is like out of a 10 scale? How highly would you recommend this movie to somebody?
I probably wouldn't recommend it because
Oh,
not
so much fun.
Not that I hate it.
Right.
But like, I'm glad I watched it one and done. That's for me. Like, at least I'm familiar with the film now. So when I have conversations about this with other people, I can talk about it. But this definitely wouldn't be a film I recommend, to somebody just because I just felt very like, I've seen it before. Everything I was already knowing what was going to be the next scene happening. Everything was so just like laid out for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one because there's other like critic reviews.
Oh my gosh. People hated this
movie. On Rotten Tomatoes, 15% approval rate.
I'm going to have to go and leave a review about why this movie is so great.
And I actually want to read a review for you guys that made me giggle about Jingle All the Way. So one review was, and I quote, "Watching Arnold Schwarzenegger take a stab at lighthearted comedy is often like watching a whale try to maintain its balance on a gymnastics beam." So I just had to say, like, I'm like, that's exactly how I felt. Not that it was terrible. Like, again, I think for a 90s film and especially the way like technology was back then, like it's not a terrible movie, but just the way everything, the movie industry has advanced now, I wouldn't recommend it. I really won't.
I absolutely recommend this movie. I cannot advocate for it enough. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. And you need to watch it with your kids because it's hilarious and it's definitely worth a watch. So
it's hilarious because it's bad.
Yes. Well, you have to go into it knowing what you're getting into. And that's part of the fun of this whole like trash film genre that we talk about. It's like you go into the movie knowing that it's not going to be as good as a movie that is trying just as hard but actually has like good content to operate from. But anyway, on that note, that's going to be about it for us this week. So definitely, you know what? Cynthia says don't watch Jingle All the Way. I say watch Jingle All the Way. We both say watch every Grinch movie that's available to you. They're all enjoyable.
The Grinch is a classic. Like, you can't hate that movie.
So make some hot cocoa, put a little peppermint stick in there, or peppermint essential oil if you're into that.
Yes. Oh, that's me. Play some Christmas, bangers in the background. You know what banger? I know.
Yeah.
So for bangers are hot,
bangers.
or hits, you guys. And on that note, you guys, we're going to end today's episode. And don't forget to leave Keith and I some nice comments.
Like and subscribe.
All of that good stuff. And catch us next week. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.